Thank you for joining us today. We understand you've got a little bit of a January melt up there in the North Country. We're pleased that you can have that so you can get ready for the onslaught of additional cold weather. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm, and we're pleased that you can join us for this first webinar in the 2017 series of our Crisis Coach webinars. Today, we're talking about benchmarking preparedness. We'd also like to invite you to become our friend on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions. You can follow us on Twitter at Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Our lawyers have asked us to remind you that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. This information should also be discussed in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. We're delighted to have this webinar series underwritten for several years now by the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce and the Eastern Great Lakes Association of Contingency Planners. We do have Sherry Vale with us. Dr. Redmond is not able to join us. She is out helping clients. Sherry, over to you, please.
Good morning. Thanks, Bill. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Sherry Vale. I'm the PR Director with Eastern Great Lakes Chapter for Association of Continuity Professionals. It's hard to switch that name. And we specialize in topics covering the realm of cyber information security, business continuity, disaster recovery. We have folks involved in the audit, internal audit arena, as well as project management, crisis management, and emergency management. So we always welcome new members. Our region is up in the Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester area. And if anyone is interested, our president is Michael Redmond, and her number is 917-882-5453. So if anyone needs more information, again, 917-882-5453. And we do have an upcoming meeting next week, January 18th. So if anyone would like information, feel free to let us know, and we've posted it out on LinkedIn and so forth. So I'll turn it back over to our wonderful Firestorm folks to get the event started.
Thank you, Sherry. Our presenter today is our very own Karen Masullo. Karen is the Chief Intelligence Officer at Firestorm. She has extensive experience in social media monitoring and management. She is excellent at training, has a variety of experience and background. So without further ado, over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice just a little bit. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Sherry. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and starting January off in a great way. I wanted to let you know that Jim Satterfield was going to be presenting today. He asked me if I could fill in because Jim is he was called onto a project in North Carolina, an emergency, and he wanted everyone to know that he was staying in a very small village in a remote country called North Carolina, where they had not upgraded his hotel since 1921. So I do appreciate that Jim is going to try to join us if he can, and I do appreciate your joining us. Let's talk a little bit about what we're getting ready to talk about today in benchmarking preparedness. This is the first of our sessions of the first of 12 for this year. And we've had a wonderful relationship thus far, and I hope we've brought some value to you. At the end of this session, there will be a brief available. Generally, it's on our site by the end of the week of these sessions. We do a transcription and then post it with any key points on our website, and that will be available to you. So it should be up by sometime late tomorrow afternoon. You can also ask a question during the session. If you have any comments or questions, you can use the GoToWebinar little dashboard. Should be on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little chat window in there, and you can ask questions, make comments. And certainly you can always contact us at webinars@firestorm.com, or go to our website and use our contact form, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And so let's jump in and congratulate you for starting January off with a fresh face and a fresh start. You know, one of the things that we say, we want you to ask questions of yourself and your teams. We want you to be able to sit down your teams and say, if the electrical lines come down with an ice storm tomorrow, do we have a backup plan? Are we ready? Are we sure? And how do we know? If 70% of our employees cannot get to our facility because of transportation issues or communicable illness, are we ready for that? Are we sure? How do we know? We want you to be futurists. We want you to be able to identify your organization's next crisis. Because we know we can if we sit down and walk through every scenario that may be possible, so that when the scenario occurs that we didn't prepare for, we have the muscle memory of the practice and the plans in place in order to better respond. There is an expectation by your customers, your suppliers, certainly your employees, the families of your employees, to keep your employees safe. So are your employees safe right now? And are you sure? How do you know? Is your equipment well maintained? Are there areas in your manufacturing facilities that may be vulnerable to access and injury? You know, one of the things I tell people is, because I manage the team that oversees our social media and traditional media monitoring on behalf of clients, which is really a part of all of our plans and programs. We find more often than not, we didn't realize it when we started 5 years ago, how many employees are going up on the roof of your building and doing illegal drugs, alcohol, or they're just partying up there. And so we have a couple of challenges. We had saw one person who was laughing because she wore her high heels up on the roof on a very hot day, and she was making holes in the tarring on the roof. Well, what impact does that have down the road when we have holes in the tarring up on our roofs? What if somebody had too much to drink? We had a tragic situation a couple of years ago here where someone in a parking garage on the 5th floor of a parking Bill or Sherry, if you can mute, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. We had somebody in a parking garage who was trying to walk and had drank too much and sadly fell from the structure. So we really want to look around and see what are our risks and how, at least, if we can't keep people from doing some odd things, how can we at least monitor if that's going on? We need to assure our board and executive management that we have well-formed, well-thought-out risk management processes, that we have correctly evaluated the risks that we face. So certainly the natural disaster risks of an organization in Orlando, Florida are going to be different than those in Rochester, New York. We need to make sure that we are smart in our evaluation of what those potential risks are and how we report those. And I think there's an important point to make here. If you are a business continuity professional, there's a business continuity expert that I don't know if you're familiar with, Ann Pickren, who is the Chief Operating Officer of MIR 3. And Ann once said to me, the most important thing for business continuity professionals is to have a seat at the table. And it's important for the board and executive management to make room at the table for business continuity professionals. Your business continuity professionals may be creating concrete, fabulous plans and programs. You may have thought through all of the important things, and you may go to your executive management team or your board and say, what is your plan in a crisis? And it doesn't have anything to do with all of the great work you've done. So we need to make sure that your plans and programs trickle up and the plans and programs trickle down, so they're consistent across the organization. And I think that's a very important point. We worked with significantly large companies where the board did not have a crisis plan for a variety of risks or program. And the little that they had considered was vastly different from the next tier down, their executive management level. And those folks weren't even talking with their business continuity folks who were really training the rest of the organization. So that's something that I'd love to see us work on in 2017, is making sure that our business continuity professionals have a seat at that decision-making table. We need to also make sure that we have a control process of our key risks, that we have a good review process for that. We know that our internal controls are operating effectively, and there's some oversight of the monitoring process. You know, as I mentioned, my team does monitoring for all sorts of risks, but it's not just in social media that we're talking about monitoring. We're talking about awareness within your entire organization. But remember, it does no good for someone to spot a problem, report it somewhere, and have that just go into some black hole of no one is ever going to know or look at this. Or we have several people reporting problems in disparate places, and that information never meets so that we can identify a pattern. So if you make widgets and you have a screw that attaches to your widgets and that screw breaks one time, it could be an anomaly. But if that screw is breaking 30 times a week, but the way it's being reported is not centralized and no one ever knows, then you have a real situation on your hands. Even more so, if that is reported and known, and then the knowledge is hidden, think Takata and airbags, then we have a much greater situation occurring. And your programs have to consider in their plans all of these different scenarios. Now, once we've looked at the new year, we've said, okay, we're going to take a look at our program. We're going to see all of our different plans within that. Without the right measurements, we're never really going to be able to understand where we stand. Hitting the right target, it's a product of understanding and setting the right goals, right? And then we need to establish the right measurements to know we're on target. So have we asked with our teams, with our senior executives, and with the board, can the organization survive a disruption or a crisis? And how do we decide if it's a guarded disruption or an elevated or severe crisis? What is a company killer? How do we think that through and plan for it so it isn't a company killer? How do we look at where your organization stands today? Do you know instinctively what your program needs to improve upon? Or do you have data and measurements that say, we know these are where our gaps are? We know in order to ensure continued service to clients and stakeholders, even when threatened by an ice blizzard, this is what we need to improve upon to make sure next year we give even better service and more consistent products. How about all the initiatives you set in 2016? How much progress are you making on those initiatives? Are you on budget? Are you on time? Have you had turnover in your teams? And now there are some parts and pieces that are missing. You know, in a somewhat related way, I worked with a company many years ago that had terminated an employee. And the company had no clear process for deprovisioning employees from their key databases. What I mean by that is, yeah, they remembered to cancel the person's email and username and password, but because the person was in IT, they not only had access to several key administrative databases within the company, but they'd also created some ghost accounts just in case their primary access was turned off. Well, no, but they didn't have a button that said, deprovision this person as admin from all of our various servers and databases and access. And the person had access for 8 continued months after they were terminated. And they quietly injected malicious code in a variety of places in the company. It could have been a company killer. So we have to look at those vulnerabilities, and as business continuity professionals, work with everyone within the organization to say, we've identified this risk. What can we do to mitigate that? Do your plans follow best practices? How do you know? What should your priorities be? There are so many priorities, and priorities change. They change with the political environment, with the economic environment. They change with the weather. What are the gaps? Have you done a SWOT analysis? And are your suppliers prepared and in line with what you believe your vulnerabilities are? And have you talked to your suppliers' suppliers? So when we measure, we know that the destination for any business continuity program is to, as we said, ensure that continued service to clients and stakeholders. And we must ask, can your business survive a major disruption without harming your brand's reputation? And can we state that categorically to our clients, our stakeholders, regulators, employees, employee families, our community? So in order to do that, we've got to build a map. And the map is not going to be a straight line from A to B, because this is going to be a rather complex trip. There are going to be a lot of stops in between and some risk to get from one place to another. Some of the roads are going to be narrow. Some of the roads are going to be highly trafficked. We may be traveling along a road happily and some other external event that has nothing to do with us causes a disruption. There's an accident that backs us up for hours. We didn't cause the event, but we're a victim of the event. So we have to identify where our starting point is for each vulnerability. What's the distance to get there? Is there an alternate route? It's great if we could just take the highway all the way, but if there's construction, do we have a good alternate route planned out ahead of time? Do we have an alternate to the alternate? And then do we have a way to measure our progress to get there? So in this new year, as you sit your teams around the table and say, okay, what are our priorities? And you have 5 different people saying 10 different things. Start one place as your starting point. Figure out how you're going to get there as a team. Figure out your best and alternate ways to get there. Figure out how you're going to measure your progress and move on to the next point. And then based on your goals and where you are with your program, how are you going to demonstrate preparedness? Have you clearly identified roles and responsibilities for various crises and scenarios? You may not have the same people doing communications for a recall, a product recall issue, as you do for a significant communicable illness incident that impacts your workforce. Do you already have the communications written up for some of those events now, today, so that when the incident happens, you just have to slightly modify the language to fit the exact scenario? Jim Satterfield tells a story quite often that I think is poignant and important. He was working in New York on 911, and they gathered everyone in a conference room, and Jim said to his one of the human resource folks at the table, he said, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone, if you want to leave, go ahead and leave. He said, we've got to make sure people are comfortable and feel safe, and if they need to leave and be with their families, we've got to support that. But it was an unprecedented event. And so Jim said, I think this is the best thing to do right this moment. Well, the woman who was in HR at that time, a valued employee, was really shaken up. And when she went to write the memo, she wrote, if you want to live, leave. And that one small typo sent the organization into quite a flurry of fear and activity, as you can well imagine. And Jim's concern was really for the poor woman who made the typo, because she was under such great stress that it was understandable. And he said it taught him an incredibly valuable lesson. Even though he knows he's got to have message maps, he's more convinced than ever that they have to be done ahead of time, so they can be slightly, the communications can then be modified gently in order to address the exact situation, to keep people and property safer. You know, we also saw, as Sherry was discussing, we were discussing with Bill and Sherry at the beginning of the session before we started, about the weather, about children being stranded in cars on roads at 3 o'clock in the morning. Many years ago, and not many years ago, was it last year or the year before in Atlanta, same thing happened, big snowstorm. And what happened was downtown, they released or closed all of the businesses. But what they, and said, everybody go home so we don't have a problem on the roads. But what they did was they did it all at one time. They didn't stagger the closings. And if you have 17,000 state and federal employees in your downtown area and you suddenly tell them all to go home at one time, what happens is you create a gridlock situation so that when the ice and snow hit, you have people sitting in gridlock. It just sounds like a horrible situation, and it was. So there's a great lesson learned there if the lesson is indeed learned. Does your plan or program cover both what to do and how to do it? This is such a great test for everyone. If I know what to do, if I know that when there's a fire in my building, my job is to lead everyone to a certain access door and down these certain stairs, but I have no clue how to open that door or how to open the next set of doors or how to gather everyone together so that we can go down those stairs in an orderly way. If I've been given the responsibility of what to do, but not the how to do it, it's really unfair to your team. And there is a great way to test that. Go to the newest hire in your floor, in your organization, on your team, and give them a crisis scenario and say, how would you carry out the next steps of what to do in our plan? It's a really great test to make sure that everyone on your team is equally prepared to respond. So the next step to take that to is grab 3 people on your teams or not on your BC teams in the organization and say, this is the plan. This is the plan that we have for a major transportation crisis where people can't even come in. Here, this is the plan for an alternate work site. This is the plan for establishing a VPN so the employees can log onto our systems. This is the plan for if the ice brings down some of our technology. Our backup servers are in Texas. We'll switch over and do some load testing on those so our e-commerce site doesn't go down. So we thought of all of these different operational issues, operational areas, and have them read the plan and then conduct interviews, just as we would. If we came in as your third party and did these, do it just as if we would. And perform your own site inspection to determine, is your program reviewed and updated at the very least annually? We know in today's world as things move so quickly, we are now looking at doing that at twice a year. So at a bare minimum, are you updating at least parts of it annually? There are some parts of it that once they're set pretty well. They're not going to change too drastically. There are other areas, the disaster recovery areas and some of those other pieces that may have to be looked at much more often. How did you go about identifying the risks? You can't identify the risks in a bubble from your own perspective. We need to make sure that there are many perspectives. Have you had a security assessment? Have you had a physical security assessment and a technology security assessment? How do you currently monitor for each threat or risk? Or do you just say, well, I know it's a threat or a risk, so when it happens, well, we knew it was going to happen. We just didn't know when. Is there a way you can monitor for these types of things? How do employees and managers know about the plan? How are you communicating? How are you training? Are you training once and done? Or are you working closely with your human resource folks or your hiring managers so that you're creating groups of people to train new folks as they come into your organization? How about temporary employees? Do they have a clue what's happening if something goes wrong? How about vendors who are on your property, working on equipment, working on machines, working on art projects? They have any clue? Do you not only know about the plan, but how to communicate it? And is every component tested again, at least annually? And something very important to Firestorm is, do you perform a hot wash afterwards? And in that hot wash, it's very important that you objectively say, we did some things really great on this, and we really fell down in these areas, so let's focus on improving those areas. We're not doing it to point out someone's flaws. We're doing it to make sure we can protect our employees and our people and property. These are life-critical issues. When you look at a site assessment alone, these are some of the parts and pieces that you need to be looking at. I think I ended that with a prepositional phrase, so I apologize to the grammarians on the call. But we want to look at the building security itself. Now, if you're in, we were working with a company that had the top 5 floors of high-rise building in Chicago. And this was during the Occupy movement. And first they were having a real challenge getting employees to work because there were protests, and the protesters were very smart. They were not just protesting outside of a specific bank or a specific financial institution, but they were protesting at train stations and other ground transport areas to block people from even getting off or to the street to get to their buildings or facilities. So we worked with them to look at alternate access routes, alternate work sites, the potential for protest at those alternate work sites. But they were the top 5 floors of a building, so there were many other dependencies other than just their building. They had to work with building management, other of their tenants and neighbors within the building. They had to look at elevator safety, things that were not specifically in their control. And it was surprising to us that they had little conversation or communication with the building management other than some of the traditional sorts of, regular maintenance issues. They needed a higher level of authority to communicate with, and they were really unsure how to go about doing that. So those are things we must set ahead of time. And then look at your key systems, monitoring, sightline, surveillance. The old thing about tailgating into a building, Jim was telling me a story the other day, and I had a very similar one myself of times when we have been on a client site, a secure client site, doing inspections or work, and have not had a badge, did not check into a main desk, and simply were able to tailgate behind an employee who had a key card or access to get into a sensitive area. And that's going to happen more often than you realize, and it's something that must be looked at, especially if over on the right-hand side you look at your security personnel. If they are contracted security personnel, someone else gives them their direction. Someone else has hired, someone else has done the background check, someone else has brought these people into your environment. How do you know if they know how to respond, if they would respond in the way you want them to respond? How have you coordinated your plans your program with those security personnel. You know, I hate to laugh at that recent commercial where a security person in a bank says, oh, I don't respond to a robbery, I just let you know when it's going on. That may happen if we don't communicate correctly with our vendors, our contracted folks, our suppliers, our temporary employees. We're going to have people who know something's going on but don't have a clue what to do, or just won't do anything when it does occur because it's outside of their responsibility. We need to make sure then that our communications are clear. They're prepared ahead of time through public address systems, notification systems. Our information technology and social media are on point. We live in an age where a significant amount of communication is being done through our social channels. They can be exceptionally helpful during a crisis or an emergency, but you have to have someone who knows how to use them, who's practiced, who has 115 character messages plus their hashtag ready for a variety of scenarios, who must be able to respond. We must have a backup to that person and a backup to the backup. And we must make sure that our messages are clear and concise and do not incite further concern, worry, or panic. Additionally, when there is a crisis of this nature, no matter how small, of any nature, no matter how small your organization is, people are going to rush to your website to see what's going on. Have you put a message on your website? Is there any more information they can gather? And your website, your server will crash if you have not done load testing beforehand. You must have some alternate system in an emergency to switch over your server to your dark website to launch during a crisis or an emergency. If you haven't done that, sit down with your IT team or your development team and let's get that done. And then we have to look at all of the other options of vulnerability, loading docks, lighting, parking. And there's a whole list here, and these will be included in the brief at the end of the session that you can get from our website tomorrow. And sit down with your teams and go through all of these areas. Because you are a partner and we have worked with you for so long, you can also contact us at webinars@firestorm.com or through our website, and we will do a high-level 1-hour interview assessment with you. It's a joint assessment we do based on interview questions, and it is a proprietary tool that we use to come up with a measurement of readiness, and there is no fee for that. So we look forward to assisting you with that. If you'd like, please reach out to us. And we're going to talk about how does your plan address the entire program framework. Have you done your risk assessment? Do you understand your workplace violent threats, behaviors of concern that may exist, intelligence monitoring, your physical property security, human resources? Are you communicating with them at the table? What is the emergency response collaboration that currently exists? What is your notification system? And are your crisis communications pieces in place? We then look at each component and then evaluate its completeness as compared to best practices. There are a variety of codes you can use for this. We're going to give you a couple of examples. The rating process at simplest, keep it as simple as possible, documented, verbally in place, incomplete, or not in place at all. Your documented plan are written in alignment with best practices and your procedures are actionable. Your content is comprehensive It provides your stakeholders with a clear understanding of their exact roles and responsibilities within the plan. There is no confusion. Plans are actionable. If we look at the standard response protocol, Firestorm supports the standard response protocol as a best practice, as an example. The SRP differentiates between a lockdown, interior doors only, and a lockout, exterior doors only. You know, when we saw situations occur at different campuses around the country, one of the things that we have seen is that students are unable to lock the doors once they're inside a classroom when they're taking shelter. We've seen people use belts and ties and desks in order to keep those doors from opening. So have you looked at your own? Have you tested your own? Do you know if that may be a vulnerability for you, especially if it's not your building? And then we want to look at the specific components. We want to know how complete a specific component is. Where is it? Where is it in your plan or in your program? Does it exist at all? Is all of the information together in one place? How accessible is it? If your plans are on a website or on a mobile device, are they also in paper? Are they only in paper? Does everybody know? And again, sit that new person down and ask them, by the way, if somebody does something really stupid on social media about our company, who do you tell? Who do you go to? Where's the plan? Where's the program? What do we do? Is everyone trained on it? And have you tested that training? And that is a key part of this. Have you tested background checks? We say we do background checks. How complete is that? Is it per functionary? Do we do it once a year? Do we do it once at hire? Do we have some sort of way to update it if something happens during that person's employ? Where's the information on that? Have we trained our teams on it? Have we tested that to see if indeed that works? As always, we ask you to follow a Predict.Plan.Perform methodology. So we really want the end goal to be that you've built a framework and outlined it in policy with clear roles and responsibilities that then have a map that guides your teams along that clear route. You know, Firestorm has identified 5 common failures in a crisis. The failure to control critical supply chains, the failure to train employees, the failure to identify and monitor all threats and vulnerabilities, the failure to update and test plans regularly, and the failure to have a crisis communication plan. So if this year we commit to those 5 key parts, I think you'll be on your way to building a better program in 2017. Next steps. Sherry, I'd like you to comment on anything you'd like next steps, and then I'll briefly cover where folks can access the brief, and thank you.
So yes, thank you, Karen. That was an excellent presentation, and I'd like to say, I know I had, excuse me, I have a little bit of a raspiness. I know my phone was an interruption. However, you touched on the COO with Mirror 3 notifications. We are actually using that system. So that actually was a test coming through my phone. We're trying to do some pre-planning communications, which you had touched on, that Jim kind of recommends that. And so that was actually a positive that that came through. So we're going to be testing with our leadership next week. So that was very valuable information. And I thought you also touched on excellent and important information as far as group planning. My organization tends to be a little bit siloed, and you kind of talked about the groups need to work in conjunction with one another. So I would say, you know, for organizations, that's kind of a good recommendation. If you can try to bring the groups together so everyone understands that it needs to work together and gather those plans and, you know, combine it all, I think that's a good benefit.
Oh, thank you. It can be really challenging, too. We try to break those silos down, but if you're in an organization that has 83 locations across the country or something like that, it's very hard for everyone to get together and get on the same page. So it's an important step to take.
Yeah, very much so. So we really would like to thank, you know, both Karen Masullo and Bill Baker and Jim Satterfield for putting on another excellent webinar. There was some great information of benefit. So greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you everyone on the call. You can again, hopefully tomorrow, be able to access the brief. And Sherry, I appreciate you and Michael's time and everyone on the call. Also, I'd like to mention, you know, we understand that to bring us in, we'd love to come into your organization, do a 3-day tabletop exercise and really help you. But that's not always possible. So what Firestorm has done is rather groundbreaking. We've created these 2-hour mini stress tests that we do virtually, sort of a long webinar that is interactive. If you haven't had a chance to attend one, we did 6 last year. We're going to do 6 this year. We've had up to 1,000 companies on a call. We've had people send us images of their teams sitting around a conference table participating in this 2-hour virtual stress test. On February 2nd from 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. Eastern, we're going to do one that is focused on the threats presented by live streaming. So if you have an employee that's live streaming some dangerous activity within your building, on your property, showing products that they feel is of poor quality, a dangerous piece of equipment, something that could hurt your brand or reputation, this would be a great exercise. Please sign up. It's on our website under our events. If you need any other information, please do contact the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce or the HCP and Michael Redmond. And you can contact us at firestorm.com, webinars@firestorm.com, and you will get the wonderful Bill Baker if you call that 1-800 number. Thanks for attending today, everyone. We look forward to our next session next month. And until then, have a great month and have a great day. Goodbye.